Feel the grip of the oar handle, smooth yet firm in your hands. Taste the salt of your own sweat and the occasional splash of water. It's all part of the journey. Welcome to another episode of Faster Masters Rowing Radio. Each week, our host, Masters rowing coach Rebecca Caro, dives deep into the world of Masters rowing. Whether you're on the water or in the gym, join us to become a faster master. Let's go rowing.
And hello everybody and welcome back. In this episode, you'll discover how to adjust blade parallels when rowing with a mixed crew. Now, a lot of us do mixed rowing a lot of the time. And so it's really important that we can set up our boat so that we all have a comfortable row and we can do our best work. But some of us are taller, some of us are shorter. So what are the things that we can do? The first thing is our goal is to align the arc of the blade. By that, I mean the circumference of the circle, which the tip of your oar goes through from the moment it goes into the water to when it comes out of the water. And you want all the blades in the crew, doesn't matter if you're sweep or sculling, they all need to be ideally rowing through the same angles so that throughout the stroke, the oars remain parallel with each other. Now, if you've got a much taller and a much shorter person, that's clearly going to be an issue. So the first things to start with is knowing the dimensions of the athletes. How tall are you relative to your wingspan? And by wingspan, I mean the measurement, if you measure yourself fingertip to fingertip. The way to find this out is to stand next to a wall, put the fingertip of one hand on the floor, and then reach up the wall till your other arm is fully extended. So both your arms are straight, and then leave that other finger at the tallest point and hold it there while you stand up, and then stand up and see where your finger is on the wall relative to the top of your head. Now, if you remember Archimedes' ideal man picture, there's a circle with a man standing in it with his arms and his legs extended, and they all touch the arc of the circumference of the circle. So his feet and his hands are all touching. And many people, myself included, I am exactly the same height as I am wingspan. But there are other people who are built very differently. I used to row a pair with a woman whose wingspan was 15 centimeters longer than her height, and she was already taller than me. So you can imagine that produced a certain amount of challenges. Jenny, if you're still out there, that was a damn good pair we did. So we do not have to be rigged identically in the boat for these taller and shorter people. And I will go through the rules of how to make the adjustments later on. But let's just start with the really simple stuff. Without changing anything else, when you get into the boat, make sure that you are set up identically if you can. This is a really good starting point, particularly if you don't want to do anything that involves tools for this particular outing. So the first measurement is to see whether or not you can get your finishes lined up and your blades parallel at the finish. And you do this by setting the back of your seat in sweep at a fixed distance behind the pin, or the face of the work is more accurate. So measure back from the face of the work, which is the vertical part of your oarlock, the inside of the square, which is next to the pin, and measure back from there. Between 58 centimeters and 62 centimeters is the general rule, depending on the height of the crew. In sculling, it's a little harder to do that because you have to have a gap between your handles at the finish in order to manage the blade extraction successfully. So in sculling, we tend to adjust to a gap between our hands. And classically, this is between 1 and 1.5 fists widths. But that will mean that your seat back, the back wheel, the back of the back wheel of your seat is a little different measurement between the different athletes. So that's a simple start point. And it's also assuming at this point that your using oars that on sculls that are the same length and inboard. Now let's have a look at, if we're going to make other adjustments, what are the adjustments that we can make? And there's a sequence that we go through. So the first things to adjust is equipment. The second things to adjust are rigging. And the third thing to adjust is the athlete's blade work. Now, let's do those in order. Equipment, moving your foot stretchers. I've already hinted about adjusting where your feet are relative to the face of the work. That is a really easy adjustment that you can do. You can also adjust the height of your shoes. If you want to prevent someone coming as far forward up the slide, you can raise the shoes up. That makes it much harder to compress. And so someone who has longer legs, you might raise their shoes up so that they can't get to a fully vertical shin position at the catch. Check your catch and finish angles relative to each person. And so you can make small changes to how you row based on the angles that you want to achieve. So someone might not roll quite so far forward if they were a taller athlete. The second things are rigging. Now, rigging takes a little bit more time, and it presumes that you are the only people using the boat if you're going to change the spans on the oarlocks and the riggers. If you're adjusting your oars, those are easier to do, and you can adjust them back if you're using shared equipment after each practice. Obviously, if you have privately owned oars and sculls, that doesn't matter so much. So in the rigging, you can change the width of the pins. If you have a tighter span in sculling, and in sweep, so the pins are closer to the side of the boat, then you can get around a bigger arc. You can work this out for yourself using a piece of string and a pencil on a piece of paper. So have the string at one length and draw the arc of a circle, and then shorten it and draw the arc of the circle, and you'll see that you can make a wider arc, a longer arc if you have a tighter span. You can also change the oar length and inboards. Now, you probably want to keep the ratio of inboard to outboard the same, but for a shorter person, if you shorten the oar length and shorten the inboard, which is the measurement from the button on the oarlock side to the end of the handle, if you shorten those, it has a similar effect of enabling them to row a longer stroke through the water, because they can reach further because the oars are shorter and the inboard is shorter. That will, if you make that sort of change, realize this will also affect the position of your foot stretcher. So you might need to go back and review your equipment setup after you've changed the oar setups. So the third thing we can work on is our blade work, how we row, changing and adapting and adjusting our technique so that we are more aligned with the other people that we're rowing with. So things that you can do, we've already talked about not rolling so far forwards if you are a very tall person or someone with very long arms. You can have less of a layback at the finish. You can even finish with your body vertical and not lean back at all. Further, you can tap your oars out before your handles get to your chest at the finish, so that you're tapping out earlier, so that you're in time and at the same parallel as the other people in the boat. If you're a shorter person, one way to lengthen your stroke through the water is to have a sequential sequence rather than a simultaneous sequence. By that I mean using your legs first before your back, before your arms, rather than simultaneous, where you might start with your legs and back activating together. So getting a long leg drive is a really good way of making the oar stay longer in the water if you are a shorter person. You can also work to get your arms wider at the catch. As you roll forwards on the recovery, use your thumbs in sculling, and in sweep, use your outside arm and your body rotation to reach further round the arc, so that your oar handle in sweep, instead of maybe going to parallel with your rigger, actually goes beyond the furthest side of the rigger metal, so that you're actually reaching further. In sculling, pushing your hands sideways instead of trying to reach forwards as if your hands stay parallel, which of course they don't in sculling. Reaching deliberately sideways so your hands go over the side of the boat as you approach the catch is another way of getting a slightly longer arc without having to adjust any rigging things. You can just row to a slightly longer arc by making your arms go wider, and do that with pushing with your thumbs, pushing sideways with your thumbs at the catch. And the other thing in sculling that you can do is to hold your arms at that real wide point as you initiate the drive. So you try and hold your handles as wide as you can for as long as you can before you have to inevitably bring them closer together as the handles come through the power phase. You can try that in sweep. It's a little bit harder to feel because you only have one oar, so you're not seeing what's happening relative to other people in the boat, but it has a similar effect to getting a long leg drive before your backswing, so that you have the impression of your feet pushing underneath your handle. So your feet push away and you're trying to hold the handle away from you for as long as possible before it has to come over your feet, over your knees and towards your body. In order to make a mixed crew go as well as possible in terms of the blade parallels, we are all going to have to make adaptations. Generally, I think meeting in the middle is a worthwhile thing. So shorter people try to row a bit longer, taller people try to row a little bit shorter. Use video. Get someone to watch you while you're rowing at firm pressure and low rate. It has to be firm pressure because when you're at pressure, you tend to row differently or closer to what you normally do. And it then, because you're pushing a good amount of water, it also shows what actually happens when your blade is fully under tension through the power phase. And that's where, of course, the blade parallels are most important when the blades are in the water, slightly less important when they're out of the water, so long as you get to the catch and the finish at the same time. So think about your capabilities and what you can change. Think about their capabilities and what they can change, and then see what you can do to meet in the middle and do your best to get your mixed crew blade parallels as close as possible to the same arc as each other. Till next time.
We are part of the RowingChat podcast network. Please tell your fellow rowers about the show. If you've learned just one helpful thing from today's episode, please consider supporting the show for as little as $1 per month by visiting fastermastersrowing.com/podcast.